Okay, so for the third time of asking, I have the Best Short Paper Awards here. Do we have Trish Varro-Souza, Caitlin Mills, and/or Alan Kingston here? I'm really keen to give them an award for the Best Short Paper. No. Oh. They've done very well out of this. They've had their award announced 3 times now, so you know all their names. If you spot them anywhere, there's a certificate for them. So let's move on to the votes from last night. This is the Best Poster Award. And the Best Poster Award goes to the poster called Towards a Process to Integrate Learning Analytics and Evidence-Centered Design for Game-Based Assessment. And our winners are Yun John Kim, Jose Ramirez Valiente, Philip Tan, Louisa Rosenheck, and Eric Klopfer. Right. I've got quite a lot of them. Right. Come up and accept your certificate, yes? Let me hand it over officially. We have a set of them for all your co-authors.
Okay, my co-workers.
Yes, everybody gets one.
Thank you very much.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I should have shown you the next slide. Sorry about that. And the final award of the conference, the Best Demo Award, is for Multimodal Tutor Builder Kits. It's to Jan Schneider, Daniel Dimitri, and Henrik Draxler. Come on up. They're all here. Come on, Henrik, you can come up as well. You're going to come up in a minute anyway. Right. There you go. All hold up your certificates. Let Maren take a photo of you.
This is the future, guys.
There they go.
Well done. Thank you.
Right, well done to everybody who won an award. And that's very coincidental because I'm now going to hand over to Hendrik, because Hendrik is going to tell you about the next wonderful LAK conference you'll all be going to. So I'll hand over to him.
Oh, thank you. So thanks, Daniela, Jan. Perfect timing to get me on the stage and to present LAK'20 again. 3rd time. I told you yesterday, my mother said you have to approach people 3 times. So it's the 3rd time I give the pitch now for LAK'20. And it will be Frankfurt, Germany. And before we go ahead, I want to give you a little bit of history of learning analytics, because we are approaching the 10th LAK, so I expect some chairs on the history of learning analytics coming up soon. So we started in Banff, Canada, basically by George Siemens kicking it out from many others, with that kind of logo. And it's really interesting to see how the logos changed over time. So that was really Fleming, LAK'20, LAK'11 going ahead. Then we went to Vancouver, LAK 2012. It was more established logo already going ahead. Then LAK'13, as far as I think, we had a first theme that was in Leuven, Belgium, Dialectics of Learning Analytics by Eric Duval, hosted. Then we went on to Indianapolis, USA, intersection of the research and theory and practice on learning analytics. Then 2015, we scaled up Poughkeepsie, US, scaling up big data to big impact. And then something really exciting happened. You see how the community is converging. The logo didn't change too much. So, and also the theme didn't change too much. So in Edinburgh, when Dragan was hosting us, enhancing impact, convergence of communities, grounding, impact and validation. And then the younger history of LAK, Vancouver 2017 again, understanding information and improving learning with data. Yeah, this is what we do. Then 2018, Sydney, Australia. I really remember it like it was yesterday. It was really amazing conference. User-centered analytics, very important point. And then we went on, LAK'19, here we are, inclusion, very big topic, very proud to see that the community takes so much care about it. And now here we go. LAK'20, Frankfurt, Germany. And we also have a theme that I will tell at the end. The program chairs worked the whole week to get the theme going. So I'm really grateful for that. So that's the little history of learning analytics. And we hope you all will contribute it to bring it further for the next 10 years and 10 new logos that coming up and to see where we will be. So LAK'20, as said, it's the 10th, so we will celebrating learning analytics at this place. This is the university place. It's a very old building, 1930 built up. And there's a couple of new ones. That was 2001 when the building was given to the university. And why here and why now? So we thought anniversary, a 10th anniversary in a city of 800 years history would be a great opportunity. A visit to LAK comes really at the right moment for the European community because a lot of learning analytics is going on there. A lot of groups are funded. There's a lot of funding into EdTech. So it will be highly appreciated that you come. And it's not Frankfurt, it's not Germany that will host you. It's a European effort. It will be France, it will be people from Spain. We are also very keen to welcome you from all over the place to come to Europe. So a few words about Frankfurt, largest European airport. Who of you ever landed in Frankfurt? Hands up. Yeah, this is what I expected, right? So you know there's an airport. It's just 11 minutes ride with public transport, and then you're in the city center, so it goes very quick. We have 1 million inhabitants that are super multicultural because we have so many banks there. Also the European Central Bank. It's located on the River Main. There's a lot of green parks around, over 50,000 hotel beds we can offer, 50 museums. There's famous wine growing area around, and surely we have castles and forests, what you expect from the Germans. Sure, we have them around and you can find them. To just give you some expression, that's the marketplace in Frankfurt, where you can find interesting and also very delicious places. You can take a boat trip from Frankfurt directly to the wining area, or you can even go to Cologne or until Amsterdam if you want to. That's all served directly from the city. You can take bicycle tours along the River Rhine. What is very famous, actually really a secret tip, if you want to do something really fancy, you can take the bicycle tips. You have all these houses in between where you can stop. They even bring you your stuff. You can go skiing if you come a week earlier. So when we consider two hours radius on Frankfurt, there's also some skiing areas. We will put all this information on the website and inform you about that. And sure, I thought I put a picture from Heidelberg that most of you should also know, right? So Heidelberg is just 40 minutes from Frankfurt, and it's easy to reach, and it's a beautiful city. There is a lot of casinos, theaters from the old ages. You can have wonderful places to visit a theater there. There's this wining area where you can also go by boat then, and find some really historical places on the history of Europe. So about the venue is also a very historical place. So we will have the workshops in the 1928 Pölzing building, what was from the IG Farben conglomerate, and what is very, well, it has a very moved history because in 1935 it was the biggest donor to the Nazi Germany party. And actually this is where all the chemicals from the Germans have been invented and spread. Thereafter it became, after the Second World War, it became the Supreme Allied Command, and Eisenhower had his office within that building. So, and the Frankfurt documents has been signed that split it Germany into two parts, and the Marshall Plan has been committed from here. So no high expectations, right? It's a very historical place. Maybe it's a good opportunity to put another declaration of Frankfurt for learning analytics there. So no high expectations. So then it became the headquarters of the US Army Corps, and it was also known as the Pentagon of Europe, as the CIA has been located there. So 2001, it was given back to the university. The university made it fully renovated the building. It looks like this at the moment, the historical part. Then you can drive on to the campus, and you have the Eisenhower Rotunda and so on, really nice historical places to see there. You can even go with the Paternoster. Do you know what a Paternoster is? It's these elevators that turn around, right? They never stop. And when you get to the top, you need to turn around. And so we have all of that there. And there's for sure also new buildings. So we put some new buildings around. The university invested really to put the buildings in a similar look and feel. And it's all the social science. So because of the moved and bad history of Frankfurt, they put all the social science around. So it's educational science, psychology. They are all around that thing and kind of guarding the historical building of the IG Farben. So we have all these modern places, modern lectures halls that you can expect. We will stream all the lectures. It's all available there. It's a very small and compact campus, but it's very green and very easy to navigate on. So just a picture from the air, the old building, Frankfurt behind with the banks. It's all public transport, very easily to reach, and the modern lecture halls where we will be. Travel-wise, as most of you have been to Frankfurt once, maybe you went not to the city, so it's very easy to reach, but as I said, it's a European effort. And you can go by train basically to Amsterdam if you want to. It's just a 2 hours ride with an ICE train. You can visit Rome from Frankfurt out easily, so just give you some inspiration what you could do there. You can also go to Barcelona, visit London, our friends that we stay close contacts with also beyond 23rd of May. And Paris for sure. I mean, it's all really on a tip there, and it's really Europe welcoming you, and it's a great opportunity for everyone to visit that. Content-wise, I'm really glad to have this team organizing the conference. So we have the conference organizer, Christoph Rensing. Christoph, are you here? Ah, there you are. So Christoph and I will go through all the burdens. But with this great support from Grace, from Nina, from Nicole, and we have a program chairs there, Katrien from Belgium, Maren Scheffel from the Open University in the Netherlands, Niels Pinkwart, and Vitumir that worked hard on the next theme that I will show you. So there are some flyers left. Please take them with them to your places, spread them around, invite people to come to Frankfurt. And the theme will be celebrating 10 years of learning analytics research, shaping the future of the field. And we would be very glad to see you all there again. Thanks. And now there's another nice, so that I'm German because I can pronounce his last name very well. It's my great pleasure to announce Jeff Hüttman. It's actually quite easy. I don't know what the problem is, von Cengage, who will introduce the next keynote.
Thank you, Henrik. Okay. All right, first of all, just speaking for all the conference attendees, I think we should all thank the organizers and people who put on a great show for us this week. So how about a round of applause for those guys? So let's, my family tried to discourage me from this, but we're gonna go for it. Let's try a joke. So 2 random variables walk into a bar. They are trying to be very discreet. However, their chatter could be heard constantly. No? Yes, thank you. All right, that's emboldened me. I'm gonna do one more. My computer-mediated communications teacher she is so mean. Her standard deviation is 0. Thank you. Well, that's enough of that. So thank you again for giving me the opportunity here. So I'm going to go to the scripted portion of my introduction. So I work for Cengage. I'm very happy to work there. I want to tell you a bit of a story, a data story about Cengage. This is about a large-scale data project at Cengage that started about 2 years ago, and it's been impacting students since the fall of last year. So through a deliberate, multidisciplinary analysis of student sentiment, buying patterns and consumption of our curricular materials, Cengage was able to model a new purchasing reality for these students based on subscription services like Audible, Spotify, Crunchyroll, and many others. The result of that project was something you might have heard about, particularly if you teach in the undergraduate realm, Cengage Unlimited. Unlimited offers a single price access to our entire library of curricular materials. It is the Netflix of higher education. And what I find most amazing about this particular project is just as the data foretold, 2 weeks ago, Cengage Unlimited, in its first 10 months of availability, went over the 1 million subscriber mark. And just as the data foretold, The savings to students domestically here in the United States just went over $60 million of savings directly to students. It has been a great story of how thoughtful application of data science was able to attack and fundamentally affect the cost of education to students. And when the rest of the industry in the world told us that we were crazy for trying to do this, and that we would fail, we trusted the data and we were right, and we continue to grow as a company. So as a result of this new model, we now have entire departments, and we have 35 institutions that have purchased unlimited access for their entire student bodies. This has given researchers and data-hungry academics of all stripes a single source provider of deep curricular data, and as a result, I now have the best job in the world. The volume and quality of the data projects that we're participating in is nothing short of amazing. And as one of the big three publishers, it's a certainty that our materials are in use someplace on your campus. If you're interested on how you might be able to work with us on ingesting our contextual learning data, please let your local Cengage rep know, or just find me, and we'll be more than happy to see how we might be able to shoot you that continuous data stream. So enough of that. It is my great pleasure today to introduce to you somebody who I just met recently, but she's an incredibly warm person, and I can't wait to hear her talk. It's Shirley Alexander from the University of Technology in Sydney. Right now, she's the Deputy Vice Chancellor and Vice President for Education and Students. The rest of her professional experience is available in many channels and will be left as an exercise for the reader. The one thing I do want to mention is this is the first time I've introduced a few people at conferences like this before. This is the first time I will have ever introduced, as a keynote speaker, a high school dropout. Yes, Shirley was a high school dropout, and she went to pursue a career in racing. Racing didn't turn out to be as lucrative as she originally thought, and returned to school, thankfully, for the entire community. There's not a ton that I really need to say about her, because I imagine she's well known to everybody in this audience. And if you want to know what is current and state of the art in this community, you need to do nothing but look at her Twitter feed. It is a library of references and happenings and conferences in the field. It was an amazing look last night. Also, the work that she does in learning spaces is phenomenal. Some of the spaces that she's been involved in building, they literally look like things people have designed that we might be able to build in the future, but they actually exist today. They're really, really, really striking. So, without further ado, it is my great and sincere pleasure on International Women's Day to introduce you to the woman, Shirley Alexander.
Thank you. Now, thank you very much for the introduction. It's great to be here at LAK again, and it's great to be amongst an audience of like-minded people. In the kind of job that I have, you're never short of feedback. So there are always people coming and telling you how you could do your job better. So you're never left wondering how you could do that. But one of the critiques I have been getting lately is someone said to me, Shirley, can you ever give a talk where you don't use data? No. So I'm very glad to be in an audience where I know you'll actually be happy that there is some data in the talk. So in case you're wondering about my title and what it means, so I'm at the level of Vice President at my university. And my portfolio means that I'm responsible for everything to do with students once they're on campus. So the programs that we teach, the quality of the teaching, quality of the learning experience, all the student services such as medical, counselling, careers, housing, I have the library in my portfolio, the Student Sports Association, even though I really only know about racing car driving, but apart from that, they don't have that at my university. And our Students Association. So it's it's quite a big portfolio. This is where I live. I took that photo on the first day of winter in Australia. And just to give you an idea of the variation, if you haven't been to Australia, this is a photo that was taken on Christmas Day at my local beach, where there's often travellers there, and they turn up on the beach and they put their country flag in the sand, and everyone who's from that country gathers around it. It's a really lovely day. Now, I've given a lot of speeches that have ended up being a disaster for one simple reason, that we sometimes get a bit lost in translation. So I've learned to actually put up a dictionary to begin. So I try to make sure that I change to the language meanings in America, but I'm not always successful. So when I say subject, you might understand that as course. When I say course, you might understand that as a program. This has been one of my biggest stumbling blocks. When I say staff, I actually mean faculty. I gave a talk once where the whole thing was lost because the audience couldn't understand why I'd be developing staff. And I couldn't understand why they couldn't understand why I'd be doing that. Assessment is often a test, and evaluation is assessment. So the beach I showed you is about 4 miles from where I work, and this is the University of Technology, Sydney. And it's been famous for a number of years. It consistently wins an award in our newspaper for Sydney's ugliest building. But we're in the middle of changing all that, and we've almost at the end of spending $1.5 billion, so that's probably $2.5 billion US, on whole campus redevelopment. And I've taken that as an opportunity to think about what the future of learning is going to be, to make sure that we're building a campus for the future of learning rather than the past. I'm just going to show you a couple of images. So this is our new engineering and IT building. That's a binary shield on the outside. And if you understand bit patterns of zeros and ones, it actually says engineering and IT. I don't know anyone who's ever checked their work. That's what it looks like at night. We have a fairly famous building that was designed by Frank Gehry, and that's our business school. And it has the most extraordinary brickwork. In fact, I was walking along beside this one day, and the person with me said, "Did you get a student to design this?" Thought it was falling. It has the appearance of crumbling. Our new science building, and a building that's under construction and almost complete, which is going to house a very different library and very different learning spaces in what many people call as potentially my career-ending move, because I've got myself onto the design team for all of these buildings. We're designing out traditional lectures by constructing classrooms that have no natural front of the room. So this building here contains 2 large 350-seat theatres, and there's no natural front of the room. I was hoping it's almost complete, and I asked someone to take a photo yesterday, and that's how it looks. So the tables are all spread around the room. But the great thing about it is that the room can be divided into 8 smaller group areas. And you'll see there that there are, if the teacher wants to get up and say something, there are 2 lecterns from which they might do it. But you can use this as a whole class, 2 classes, 4 classes, or 8 classes. So we've been on that journey for some time, and these are our existing collaborative classrooms. So that's what our lectures look like. Students come and they engage in collaborative learning activities. We have lots of large flat floor spaces where students are working in groups and teams, and there are platforms all around the room. And students get up and present what they've been doing to the rest of the class. But most of the classrooms at UTS look like this. They're small pods, and students are engaged in group work. So that's just a bit of a context of where I come from and the journey we're on. I could talk for the whole hour about what we're doing, but I'm here to talk about analytics. And what I'd like to say is I think there's really, this is my third or fourth LAK, and I think there's great work going on in analytics. But how are we really contributing to what I see as the big issues in higher education? So I'm speaking from my perspective as a senior executive in a large university with 45,000 students. So I want to talk a little bit about our journey because I'm so interested in data. I love data, as anyone will tell you. I had a vision some years ago of becoming what I call a data-intensive university. And this is the timeline of our first journey into becoming a data-intensive university. The first thing was actually to raise awareness of what might be possible. So I took myself off to LAK in 2012 in Vancouver, and I have to say I've been to a lot of conferences. As you can imagine, I'm at probably the tail end of my career, but the thing I loved about LAK is that it was such a community. Everyone who gave presentations then made all their presentations available on SlideShare. There was a very active Twitter feed at the time when it was only the early days of Twitter. If anyone mentioned a website or a resource, someone set up a Google Doc and everyone contributed the URLs to that Google Doc. It was really quite an extraordinary community. And the back chat on the Twitter channel was really wonderful. And I got a huge amount out of that. I thought you might be interested in seeing some of the papers that were there. There was a 2012 Review of Future Challenges by Rebecca Ferguson. And you can see what Rebecca thought were the challenges. There was a paper on how to build organisational capability in analytics. And they had done a survey of the leading vendors, and it's interesting to see who's there as a leading vendor and who isn't, just how much that field has changed over time. And the proven means for optimising student success. I'm not quite sure I'd go as far as saying proven because we've got a lot of work to do yet, but that were some of the really interesting papers, and that was an important catalyst for me in becoming a data-intensive university. So how do you turn around a whole university to think about this? So I organised a data-intensive university forum, and being in my role, I can invite people to come and they'll come. So I invited the whole university, and we had about 200 people came for the day. There were deans, directors, faculty. We had some keynote speakers. You might recognise one in the top photo in the middle there. He's in the audience today, in fact, George Siemens. And we had a very active Twitter feed going forward during the day so that everyone was involved. And that led to making a proposal to our president to become a data-intensive university and to set up a centralised unit. He bought the idea, but he hated the name Data Intensive University and said, I'll give you the money to set this up if you call it something else. And so it became known as the Connected Intelligence Centre. Now, this takes money off the top of the budget, and as anyone in my kind of role knows, never stand between deans and money. And if you do stand between them, you need to show them that they're getting value for that money. So it was very critical for us that we have an agenda that's going to really add value. Otherwise, the deans will want that funding back in their own faculties. So this is the structure that we're working with. So I report to our president. I have a colleague who's DVC Research, Corporate Services. But what's interesting about that is that normally there is a hierarchy where academics report to the provost and they don't really have a lot to do with anybody else. But because of the structure that we've got, and those 4 people are very involved in KIC, the Connected Intelligence Centre, it means that academics are talking to the people in IT and vice versa. And that's really critical to getting a whole of university approach to using analytics. So then I had to think who could be the person who could lead this, and managed to persuade Simon Buckingham-Shum to move to Australia and become the inaugural director. So most of the projects I'm going to be showing you today have been led by Simon and his team. I think most of them are here except for Simon Knight. So just to be very clear, I haven't actually done the projects I'm showing. It's this team here who have been doing that, and all driven by Simon. So the first stage in becoming a data-intensive university, still my secret name for the project, is to make sure people understand data. If we're going to be using lots of data in our work, then people really need to understand it. And I'm always staggered at the very low level of understanding of data that there exists at all levels of students, faculty, and the public. So one of my favourite war stories is that we had a state minister for education. So this is the person in charge of education in our state. And she gave a press conference one day and she said, "I'm absolutely appalled to find that
tech support."
Sorry, I'll just use this. So she said, "I'm absolutely appalled to find that half the students in this state are below average in mathematics." Now, you all laugh, but I cannot tell you how often I give that speech and people look at me waiting for the punchline. We had a federal minister in Parliament who stood up and said, "The dream of the unions is that one day all workers will earn above average salaries." So people can calculate an average, but they absolutely have no idea what it means and why it's important. So I can't tell you how many meetings I sit at where people look at graphs going up or down and they say the sky's falling in, we have to move resources from here to here, and I look at it and I say, look, I'm a lap statistician and I haven't done the test, but just eyeballing it with the numbers, that's random variation. This is not something that's significant. People have no concept of random variation. So I thought the first thing we need to do is make sure that our community understands these things, understands what are the basic ideas around data that people need to understand to be able to make good use of the data that we're giving them. So we came up with the idea of a subject called arguments. It's called Arguments, Evidence and Intuition. And I found it incredibly hard to find someone to write this subject because people in maths and stats say we own this area and they want to give everyone formulas to learn. But that's about the worst thing that you can do. So I don't care if people can calculate an average, if they can calculate a standard deviation, but I want them to understand what it means and why it's important. when you see a graph in a journal or a newspaper, what should you be looking for? If someone says a survey showed, what questions do you ask? I'm always asking, how many in the sample? Where did the sample come from? And so on. So the ability to ask good questions is incredibly important. So we developed this subject, which is really about what do you use as arguments in order to make a case for something? What do you use as evidence? And how to be careful not to use your intuition. And I often use that famous bat and ball problem that you've probably seen in the Thinking Fast and Slow book, that you have a bat and a ball that together cost $1.10. The bat costs more than $1 more than the ball, so how much does each cost? People always jump straight in and say the bat costs $1. But of course, if it costs $1 more than the ball, that's not right. The correct answer is 5 cents and 95 cents. So, making people aware that they often use fast thinking because they're using their intuition, and sometimes their intuition is wrong. So we ran this as a, I was going to say staff development, faculty, all staff, faculty and professional staff development. We ran that twice, and each time we made changes to it. And we've started rolling that out across the campus. And so my controversial decision has been that every student at our university has to be enrolled in a subject like this or have done an equivalent, so that every one of our graduates develops a level of numeracy. I still have a way to go, but we're on the right path. So the KIC team has also developed some open courses that are available for free. One on what does Facebook know about you? The other one is creating a data journey, and those are openly available to anyone who would like to go online and enroll in it. So along with ensuring that we have a good level of literacy, we also need to pay attention to ethics and data and algorithms. So the KIC team has been running events across the whole university, humans, data, AI and ethics, ran for a whole day. And they do things like host public screenings of the human face of big data. So all the while working across the university to raise literacy, both about how to use data and what it means, but also the ethics of using them. So I'd now like to move on to what's really the main part of my talk today, and that's what I see as being the big challenges for higher education. So, and these are what I see as being the challenges. The first one is probably the major one, and that is the rising cost of education and who is going to pay. So apparently student debt in the US is $1.5, $1.6 trillion. Not much better in the UK, 12 billion whole, and over the next 25 years, £1 trillion. In Australia, it's a similar story. Total student debt is $54 billion. A quarter of those loans are never repaid. And George Siemens was telling me something interesting yesterday, that in the US, if you declare bankruptcy and you have a student debt, that is not wiped out by being declared bankrupt. And I find that really extraordinary. So this debt is large already, and it's increasing rapidly. And that shows what it looks like in Australia, at least. And I found this image of what the average student debt is around the world. So with this debt problem, at the same time that we have an ageing population, governments are going to be looking at how they can slash the costs of higher education. In fact, they're already starting to look at it. And when we talk about expanding programs and doing more, we're not going to get any more money because they have to fund aged care, they have to fund more hospitals, they have to fund social security for the elderly because we have this ageing population. And we're all under pressure to improve our productivity. So my question is, how can we use analytics to try and help address the rising costs of education? Because if we don't do it, we're just going to get cuts across the board. You can see governments looking with their arms rubbing together at online education, straight online education. Is that the future that we want? Or do we believe that an on-campus education is still a valuable thing? If we do, we have to find ways of doing it in a financially sustainable way. So that's what we've been trying to do at UTS. And I'm just going to talk about a couple of the major projects that we've had about promoting student success at the same time as we try to decrease the cost of education. So what do we actually know about our students' experience? Well, it turns out we actually know quite a lot. These are all the surveys that we do. Well, they're not all of them. These are the major surveys that we do involving our students. So we know an awful lot about our students, except that we don't really, because we haven't joined all that up yet. And that's one of our major projects. What I did do, though, was to try and look at what student experience strengths are and what the pain points are. You won't be able to read that, so I've cut it down. So in terms of pre-enrollment, why do students choose UTS? And you can see there, good reputation, high graduate employment rates. We have one of the highest employment rates in the country. But where are the pain points? They want more advice on course selection, so there's a clue for what we need to do better. Accommodation costs too high. Not a lot I can do about that, but it's good to know. The learning experience, 28%, and that's a high percentage of people who say that group work team skills are not well developed, want more English language support, want a more personalised experience. And the one that comes up over and over at the bottom there is wanting more feedback from teaching staff. Students always want more feedback. And you still run across students who get an essay back where it says 6 out of 10 good work. What a waste of time that was, doing that piece of work. No feedback at all. And then in terms of campus life, want even more study spaces, which I find extraordinary given the number of spaces that we have, but still. So we also know that there's a high variation between different student cohorts and impacts can be subtle. So one of our most expensive degrees is our Bachelor of International Studies, where we actually pay for students to spend a year overseas studying. But we need to know, does that improve any outcomes at all? But you need big numbers to do this, and this analysis that Simon's team did required tens of thousands of student grades over many years. But they did show that students who come in to that degree enter with above average grades. They have the experience, and when they graduate, they have much further above average grades. This year we've started something different, which is try to produce an undergraduate student journey map. So this is all adding to the data that we have about our student experience. So we look at what triggered their journey to our institution, what methods they used to inquire about it, what the enrolment experience was like, orientation, study and participation, and then exit to becoming an alumnus of the university. And I've just picked out this area and this area to show you in some detail. So these are actual student quotes down the side, but what the insight is that the undergraduate student experience is positive for students who follow a typical linear pathway. However, those who are on different pathways or not clear on course direction have challenges. Probably something that you would know through intuition, but it's good to see it there. And to know that if we are going to become an even more inclusive university, then we have to really look at the pathways of students who are quite different. And here's the feedback issue again, and here's one of the students saying, was once feedback I got was really short, great job, I got 70%. Well, how can I improve it? So that you get very clear indicators of the areas that we need to work on. So we know that students want more feedback on assessments, but how can we do that in a cost-effective way? When I was more junior in my institution, I used to sit on a lot of interview panels for new faculty members. And I always ask the question, what do you like least about being a teacher? And guess what? 99% of people say grading. No one likes grading, marking. So I think I personally think it's the most interesting thing that you can do as a teacher, because it gives you a sense of how people have understood what you've been trying to teach them. But it is what it is. So what can we do about that? We know it's highly valued by students, but faculty tend not to want to do it. So Simon and his team have developed this program called Accreditation, which gives students automated feedback on the structure of their academic writing. And the students can use this tool as many times as they like to improve the structure of their work. So having done a lot of marking in my academic career as well, you often end up spending a lot of time showing the student how they could have structured the assignment a lot better. So this is done in an automated way, and then once the student is happy with it, they submit it to the academic or the faculty member, who can then mark it on the ideas. So does it work? So a PhD student, Shabani, who's here, has been doing some work on impact. So we're rolling that out in different faculties. So this is students in law. I should have mentioned what a rhetorical move is. So things like, do you have a summary? Do you have position points? That's a rhetorical move. So students use that quite a lot. And as you can see, it had quite a big difference between those who didn't use it and those who did. Now I should point out that Simon and his team have put Accreditation up as open source. So if you're interested in using it, then please do. So what do students say about it? What do faculty say about it? Okay, so that's my first example of trying to use analytics. In this case, it's writing analytics to improve the student experience, and hopefully at scale that will not cost a lot of money and might decrease our costs. Students always want more development of group work skills, so how can we do that in a cost-effective way? So Roberto Martinez, who's here, has been doing a lot of work on physical group work tasks. So here we have, that's not a real patient, by the way, that's one of those incredibly expensive mannequins where you alter their blood pressure and see what happens. So we have teams in health who are responding to that, but how are they actually working? as a team. And this piece of work gives them feedback on what happened in that simulation and who was doing what. So Roberto is here. I think he's giving a paper on this, or he has already given a paper on this, so it will be in the proceedings. And again, if you're interested in this, please build on this work. So what's the impact of this? What does staff say? What do students say? So they're the two projects that I'm putting forward as examples of the use of analytics to improve the student experience, but at a sustainable cost. So where are we going next with this? It's really important now that we roll these out to the whole university. So Accreditation, we want to put into every single course in the university. And then to look at how effective it is in improving students' writing. The next big challenge we have is of inclusion and success, and of course that's a theme of this conference. And one of the areas that we've been doing a lot of work on is English language skill development. We have close to 30% of students at my institution come from international students. And sometimes their language is not as adequate as it should be. And so we have to try to identify those students and give them the best help that we can. But we are also interested in the English language, because we've accepted the students, the onus is on us to ensure that they develop those language skills. But we're also interested in the different pathways that these students come from, and are there pathways where the English is not as adequate as it might be. So once again, we're using analytics to help us understand what those different pathways might be. On the x-axis there it says average OPELA score. So OPELA stands for Online Post-Enrollment Language Assessment. Every student who comes into UTS has to do this OPELA test, just as a basic measure of their English language. And the y-axis is the average subject mark. So every time they do a course, what's their average subject mark? So you can see in the top right-hand corner, those with the highest OPELA scores and the highest subject marks have come straight from high school in Australia. But there's a purple dot there. That's the students who've transferred in from other undergraduate courses in Australia. Staff in KIC also did a contour map, which, so the blue contour are domestic students, the red is international, and the green is from one of our pathways. So I've now seen that that's a pathway that we need to do some work on, because they're statistically different to other international students. Now we also have, a significant focus at UTS on social justice, and so we have this quite complex social impact framework. But I've blown that up so that you can see that we have a goal of increased number of equity target groups successfully completing a higher education degree at UTS. So this is written into our framework at the university. So we need to continue using analytics to better understand those cohort variation outcomes and experiences, and then look at the interventions. We don't have the funding to target individual students, but we have to do it on a cohort by cohort basis. Next one is graduate employability. And this is a graph of under and unemployment in Australia, and there's no reason I think that this would be too different to where you're from. So we've been experiencing the highest levels of under and unemployment since 1980. By underemployment, I mean a student who studied particular course, and then my worst nightmare is getting into an Uber or a taxi, and I'm going back to UTS and they say, oh, I did a PhD at UTS. What? But there's often a good reason, thank heavens for that, but that sometimes there may not be. So someone has outlaid all that money on a degree and they're driving a taxi. So that is a big problem for us. So most universities are really focused on graduate employability, and there's a lot of quite innovative programs going on around the world which is really trying to integrate employability into learning and teaching. So there's a lot of this is private organisations offering experiential learning opportunities that is really like a cooperative learning education. There are bridging programs, and I saw this one at Chuck Business Bridge program where students pay $11,000 at the end of a course degree to get business skills as a way of bridging between their higher education degree and work. Now, I think that's a problem in that we need to be, if that is so important that we think students should spend $11,000 on it, we should be building it into our degree programs. There are boot camps, the same kind of thing. Students can pay a certain amount of money and go off and learn how to code, and of course there are code academies springing up everywhere. So it seems as though we have not been doing as well as we might in preparing our students for the workforce. So what data do we know? This is some data that came out in the Foundation for Young Australians report, and this is really interesting data. So if you take a male from a low SES area and compare it to a male from a high SES area, the one with enterprise skills versus no enterprise skills will get a job 11 months faster. Really interesting. This is big data. This is hundreds of thousands of data points. Same with female versus male. So this is starting to look at the different cohorts, but what actually makes a difference? Now I think this is really, really interesting work. So what are these enterprise skills that keep coming up as being so important? This is what is described as enterprise skills: the problem solving, communications, digital literacy, critical thinking, presentation skills, and so on. So what we've been trying to do, there's also some data which I didn't show you then, which was that if someone has a certain number of hours of work experience, they're also X months faster in getting a job. So we've introduced the idea that every student at UTS must have an opportunity to undertake either an internship or an internship-like experience. So that's quite a difficult thing to do because we have to help them to find the internships in the first place, and we have to follow up to see how they're going. So what's been the impact of that? So if we look at those who've been able to get a job, you can see that of those who had completed an internship, 70% had got a job and 40% hadn't. So if students have, and then on the right-hand side, it's the work experience they have. So these internships are really incredibly important in getting a job. Science graduates in particular have some of the lowest employment rates, which I always find extraordinary given that we're always hearing we need more STEM graduates. So we've paid a particular focus on our science students in getting a job. So of those who've completed an internship, nearly 60% have got a job compared to 30%. So it's double if they've done an internship. So again, using analytics to understand what we need to do to help our students get employment. It's also personalised feedback to build competencies for a lifetime of learning. And a fairly new project that we've embarked on is looking at all the data that's been skimmed off all of the online job advertisements and breaking them down by category. So if you're wanting to be a programmer, if there are jobs for programmers, systems analysts, business analysts, what are the skills that those job adverts are seeking, and match those up with our curriculum. So I'll occasionally get an email from a student who will tell me that our IT department is teaching a language that's old hat and no one uses that anymore. So we can actually use this data and say, is there any evidence to suggest that is true? So the way that we're going to use this kind of analytics is that when any new degree program is up for re-accreditation or a new accreditation, we're going to match the skills that the students are going to develop with the jobs, just to make sure that there are no big gaps in the areas. We're also writing a program so that students can go into this program and say, I have these skills, what jobs could I get? So this is going to be a really important tool for students to have. We're also using text analytics to help us better understand the feedback that we get. So if we're looking for feedback, such as something that's real and occupation, if you use Google, it will look for words like imperialism and oppression and so on. But what the UTS model does is look for words in the text that are more relevant to what it is that we're trying to do. So where to next? So my prediction is that employability will become the major area for attention alongside the cost of education. And so we need to be better understanding how students come to be employed, gainfully employed, not in a job but in a career, and better understand what we need to do in changing our degree programs to ensure that we have the highest employment rates. I really strongly predict that this is going to be a big issue for the future. My final big issue is the premium of a formal award degree. So there are lots of articles about this around at the moment, all over the world. In Australia we get headlines, PwC is not going to look at transcripts, ignore university results. But still, we know that students who do gain a degree have the lowest unemployment rates of anyone at this time. But we do need to be keeping an eye on that, because that's our major business. Whenever anyone complains about how much money I'm spending on teaching and learning at my university, I remind them that teaching and learning brings in 80% of our income. That is our major business. And if that ever goes away, if people stop valuing a formal award degree, that's the end of our business. That is our major income source. So we need to be looking at what it is that makes us special. And of course there are lots of new ways of certifying and accrediting learning that are competing. So whatever we're doing, we have to be doing better than what these folks are offering. So I just want to give you one example of a really new kind of degree. This is one that was my idea. Everything else I've shown you pretty much has been Simon's work, except for arguments, evidence and intuition. But we're looking at how we can see that one of the enterprise skills in the future is creativity and innovation. But how do you actually teach that? Do you have a formal standalone degree where students learn to be creative and innovative? Well, you could. But it's hard to imagine how someone would ever gain employment from a degree like that. You can't turn up and say, hire me, I'm creative. You have to be creative in something. So we decided to make this a double degree. So students can choose 25 different degrees. They can do a Bachelor of Business, Bachelor of Education, Bachelor of Science, and they do this as a double degree. But it is what I call a transdisciplinary degree, and we've turned curriculum on its head, essentially. Because what we recognise that all the challenges that we're facing are complex, dynamic, networked, and people who can work across that complex space are going to be highly valued. So we've combined knowledge from 25 different degrees, 7 faculties. Now this is the really important thing. We work with industry. Most curriculum is designed as first year as intro, intermediate, advanced, and then a capstone project. We've actually turned that on its head. And the students begin with a real industry problem. And we actually have industry coming in. And the students learn the different disciplinary approaches to unpacking the problems. So how does a scientist think about this problem? How does a designer think about this problem? How does a lawyer think about this problem? And so we think that innovation happens at the intersection of all of these different disciplinary boundaries. So as I said, we work with industry who come in and pose their problems. And these afford students quite authentic learning opportunities. And as you can see, there's no lectures in this. It's all a studio-based model. This has been one of the most innovative degrees in Australia. This is someone else saying that, not me. In the last 5 years, the students who come out of this are absolutely phenomenal. They do their internship in their degree, and we often struggle to get them to come back and finish the degree because the workplace wants them to stay. And I've had CEOs of organisations say to me, we'll take every student we can get out of that degree. So we're now looking at what that might look like in the master's degree space. But then the challenge is that we say we're teaching the enterprise skills, or the students are learning those enterprise skills while they're studying this degree. But how do we actually know, and how can we use analytics here? So we've, another academic, Darrell Thompson at UTS, has written this program called Review, which enables students to self-assess, because we want students to develop a capacity to assess their own work. So they use the slider on that rainbow scale that you can see to mark their own work. They can have a peer also give them feedback on their work, and then the faculty member gives their judgment and also written comments. And it's all about their achievement of those enterprise skills. And that program Review has now been commercialized, and it's being used in a number of universities and schools in Australia, and I think overseas as well. So, as I said, the aim is helping students to see how they have developed those transferable enterprise skills or graduate attributes. So, where I think we need to go next is what really differentiates a UTS graduate. Why would someone pay all the money to come onto our campus, even though they have a blended learning experience? It's a mixture of online and face-to-face, but why would they undertake a formal UTS degree? So we are still working on that, but I think it's a critical issue for the future, and what our main product is. So, in summary, what I'd like to say, I hope my talk has been about, is focus on using analytics to contribute to the big picture. What is the big picture in higher education? What are the big problems that we're trying to solve? And think big. Form teams and work across discipline boundaries. If you're someone who works in an IT department, try to make connections with faculty members and and try to adopt and build on each other's work. As a community, we're not going to get very far by doing our own little bits of work. We have to try and adopt other people's work, evaluate it in our own context, but keep building on it so that it becomes a really worthwhile investment. And probably my final piece of advice is to get your VP or Vice Provost to go to LAK 2020.